welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival on this very special Bank Holiday Monday. What are your plans? I'm thinking of going to the attic.
I'm going to walk round and round the tiny living room slash kitchen.
I saw a lovely thing that there's a boy who's making money. We'll put up a link. And what he's going to do, he only lives in a little house, but he's going to run a marathon over the week, just running around his house, which I think is really a charming thing.
A man from Sidcup did that, doing laps of his garden. And he's my age, and I was born in Sidcup. And I was very proud of him, but I was also like, you are really showing up me in this. You have done incredibly. And he did it because he was training for an ultra marathon in the Sahara. I was just like, wow, incredible. Well, yeah, I'm impressed by it.
There's a book in the Sidcup way, isn't there? And the whole kind of training technique that's been used by most of the great athletes from Sidcup, as far as I remember. I may be wrong about that. Should we do a show and tell? And then I'm good. I'm kind of, I like everyone. Everything's fine. And then you suddenly get incredibly frustrated. And then you remember that's reality. And last night I was just getting fed up with seeing people. I know we've mentioned it on the show, but you know, that whole thing about, hey guys, don't worry if you're not doing anything. Hey guys, look, it's okay not to do. There's more people saying, hey guys, don't worry about doing anything, than people saying, why not do something? And I find that ultimately that becomes a very English thing, which is to say it's absolutely fine. And in fact, don't even have an aspiration of reading a book. Should you have extra spare time and you're thinking about doing something, don't. It only shows up your neighbours who'll then feel. Do you want your neighbours?
The guy who ran the marathon is to be celebrated. I'm not saying he's a bad person.
So anyway, I'm feisty and I'm ready, and I've got some new kettlebells. So yes, I'm ready for the fight.
What weight?
They're just two 8-kilogram bells at the moment. I think that's what they are. Yeah.
If you carry both of them, that's the weight of my daughter.
Oh, well, I've been carrying that. I'll easily be able to. I can do right now. There's a lot of different moves I can do, so that's absolutely fine. And you're all right. You had fun with the Quarantine Comedy Club on Friday?
Yes, and it's been a very traumatic weekend to be a left-wing member of the Labour Party. Hey! So it's just nice. What's nice about this pandemic is every time you think, well, this is so incredibly depressing, but at least nothing else can emotionally traumatize me today from the news. They'll go, oh, don't worry. Here's something that just to distract you with despair all day. So it's really good. I'm really, really considering developing some new interests.
Well, that's what I've said to you. I have found by focusing more on cosmology than on molecular biology, I've found a lot more fun in my existence. Wow, Hawking radiation's amazing. Well, do you know, actually, Stephen Hawking once said this, and oh no, I didn't realise. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I've been thinking about becoming a member of the landed gentry. I think that will really help me be calmer about these things.
I see you not so much being that. I see you being an eccentric naturalist, like the wonderful woman who did a lot of work on fleas. Oh, it's really great. If no one's seen this stuff before, there's a documentary all about her work. She was a really wonderful, and she would have kept rabbits so she could comb them to get the fleas, and then she would film flea jumps, and they're really remarkable because they jump so fast. The frames of film aren't quick enough, so basically it's just here and gone. And it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'd love to film eccentric fleas.
So anyway,
a nice thing. This is a show and tell thing. This is a card that we made a long time ago for Arts Emergency because two of our guests today have been incredible supporters and advocates for Arts Emergency, which is our organisation to try to expand who is able to make culture and be involved in the cultural sector and the arts and humanities. And we made these little cards and it says, intellect knows no rank. And then on the back it says, secret agent for justice. You have been chosen to join our network. This is because you are of a sensitive, considerate and or artistic disposition and have the potential to change the world. We made these up sort of a while ago while we were still quite a fledgling organisation. And I found one the other day and you can tell we were a fledgling organisation because it's hand laminated badly.
Yeah, I know, but your early work was never even laminated, wasn't it? Most of I've got yours is inky photocopies, and I'm very glad to own that archive. I should mention because you mentioned Arts Emergency. I was showing you. I was just going to mention, because you mentioned Arts Emergency, that one of the things that we're doing with this show is we have a tip jar, which is somewhere around on your screen. And what we're doing is we're trying to collect money to get a fund together to finance some of the acts who basically have lost all their work. And as opposed to what some people might imagine, which is everyone in show business has loads of money, a lot of people do work very hand to mouth. So we're trying to make sure that we've got a fund for some of the people that we know have kind of hit the wall, and also to build up money for some of the smaller art centres as well. So I just thought I'd do that. My thing is, I found it. I was mentioning it the other day. Mine is Donald Sinden's copy of the shooting script of the film Villain, actually signed by Donald Sinden somewhere there. There we go. Donald Sinden's signature. And my dad, it's the only thing he's ever bought in an auction. I was meant to go with him to see Donald Sinden doing a chat, and then unfortunately got trapped in Leeds, and so he thought I better buy him something, and he got me the dialogue and continuity Villain screenplay, and which is now, it's a fascinating film. If no one's ever seen it, it's one of those, it's kind of, some people would say, in the shade of Get Carter and those early 70s gangster movies, and it has a weird Cockney accent from Richard Burton, but it is it's a really interesting, gritty and quite kind of strange film, and is then also the character you see Ian McShane playing in things like Sexy Beast is in some ways an imagining of where he would have been 30 years later. So that is my show and tell, a little bit of Donald Sinden.
Very cool.
We should introduce our guest. Well, our first guest today. Later on, we're going to be talking to Sam West. But first of all, I'm really glad that he's doing this, because I never imagined that he would embrace this. Well, he hasn't embraced this technology. He's kind of picked up this technology, and then he'll drop it soon afterwards. But it is Stewart Lee. Hello, Stewart. Hello, Stewart.
Hello. Am I on the screen now?
Yes, you are on the screen, and you do look like, not dissimilar to Paul Newman in the not very good Robert Altman film Quintet. You look very much like you're ready for the dystopia at any moment.
Actually, what I'm sitting in is an Anderson shelter from World War II.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought would be interesting, because we're obviously in the greatest bit of social tumult since then, and so this was in the 40s, people in this house presumably would have come down here in the cellar and hidden in here. You can see that the roof's all reinforced with iron bars, and they would have sheltered here, and loads of the streets around here were bombed. So I'm invoking the Blitz spirit for everyone. But I've also come down here because there's not very many personal details in here, and
there's none.
Four mad stalkers. I don't really want to give away anything about where I live or any things that I have. But I can see you, Robin, live in an attic piled up.
This won't surprise you, will it? There we go.
It's exactly what's expected, isn't it? But that was, see, now you've given even more ammunition to the likes of Toby Young. Typical, yet again, the left-wing liberal media elite, they're spending the pandemic in their Anderson shelters, so...
Yeah, that's a very good impression, actually, that you did there of him. That's a really good impression. I think the tide might be turning, all that stuff. Did you see that really funny... The MASH report is much better without a studio audience or a set or anything like that, and because it feels subversive, because it feels like it's been assembled without anyone's permission. It's quite interesting, but they did a really good thing that they'd managed to assemble together about sort of opinion columnists. Did you see that?
No,
I haven't. Not yet. That must have been
provocateur. It's the sort of thing that I think will creepingly go viral, but it was really great.
We've been talking about this a bit. I mean, it's been an interesting because in some ways people seem to be marginalised, but it might just be my hopes and dreams that I have. Just for a short period of time, it seemed we were seeing more people with actually some level of expertise. But it's just such a fascinating thing, and I know it's always happened, but it seems the speed of the Stalinist rewrite in their mind is even quicker than it used to be. That bit of writing a column that is entirely wrong, and 2 days later writing one which is just as gung-ho and filled with self-belief, and to perpetually live that life in such a strong a sense of cognitive dissonance, which is seems kind of it seems like it's even more highlighted now.
Maybe it's an amazing adrenaline hit to do that over and over again. Who knows?
I think that must be it. I think there must be something quite base and physical involved with it.
Yeah,
I really do. Stewart, you sent us a list of the books you've been reading, and I couldn't help but notice that you've read recently The Plague and Journal of a Plague Year.
Yeah, I've actually got them on the go at the moment, to be fair. I've got, this is a Journal of the Plague Year.
I really love that book. I read it at university.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's so many great things in it. I mean, first of all, the officials in London play down all the figures so as not to freak people out. Then secondly, all sorts of untrustworthy rumour mongers become popular with the public, and it follows the same sort of patterns as we're seeing now. But what's really interesting later on in this book, in Journal of the Plague Year, is the people start doing a runner towards Epping Forest, and they're literally going up Stamford Hill, which is, I know you live in Hackney, and so in between you and me, basically, they're heading north up the Dalston High Road, and they're sheltering in barns in Hackney and Dalston because they're not allowed to be on the move, and they're all trying to get to Epping Forest to camp and wait the plague out while in Epping Forest. But it's absolutely brilliant, and Defoe wrote it from notes of his uncle. He was only 5 when the plague happened, Defoe, and he wrote it from notes of his uncle. It also made me very sad because he's obviously in this area where I live. He lived here, and when I moved here in the 90s, there was a Robinson Crusoe pub and a Defoe pub and a Defoe minicabs, and all their names have been changed now to other things that don't commemorate him, and it's just a sort of shame. It sounds a bit Daily Telegraphy to complain about this, but I think it is it's a shame to see all the local history kind of ripped out of names. And
of course, but also he was a radical person and a radical thinker, and he was a religious dissenter and wasn't allowed to be buried in the main cemetery. So it's not like you're trying to defend somebody who isn't worthy of praise.
That's why he had to come up to Hackney, Josie, because he had to live outside normal society. Reading The Plague Again by Albert Camus, and I knew I'd got a copy of it, and then I found it's my school copy, which says Stewart Lee Prize for Acting, July 1985, and that from school. But yeah, this has got all the same things as well. Government, the authorities massaging the figures, people not really believing it. So it's great to read them in tandem. But the other book I'm reading simultaneously is Oliver Dobell's new book about the history of alternative comedy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's really good. Yeah.
1979, as a sort of as a year when everything changed. But it's really good. Someone's finally done this book. You'll be pleased to know, both of you, there's not many 21st century comedians mentioned in it, but you're both mentioned as inheritors of this tradition. And in fact, you can see the bad photocopied artwork of a 1979 comedy poster has a very Josie Long aesthetic about it.
We had him on, actually. I don't think it's gone out yet. I read it, and it's really, at the moment it's very expensive because it's in the academic hardback, but I think it's going to come out in a paperback at some point as well. But it's really worth it if you also, when the libraries are back open, if your library can get hold of a copy, get it, because that was one of the things that I find interesting. Is there's some very funny bits from that where when alternative comedy started to get noticed, articles in things like The Stage from old performers and old critics going, I mean, the trouble with these young people is they haven't learnt the skills yet, all that stuff. And then during this time, of course, while you've been watching things with probably high artistic intent, I've been watching old episodes of Summertime Seaside Special. And the idea, anyone who wonders why punk was needed or why alternative comedy was needed only has to watch Summertime Seaside Special, just one of them, to watch Mike and Bernie Winters and to consider, some of these things as having a level of art. It's so bad. It's so terrible. And I do sometimes watch old clips of alternative comedy and go, well, that's not very good. But it's only not, it's not even not as very good as people who've been doing it for 40 years at the end of a pier. And I'm not saying all of those acts, but a lot of them were just diabolical.
What I like is that you're reigniting a 35-year-old culture war. And why not?
Robin, Mike and Bernie Winters. Don't let them. You know what though? The thing is though, I was 52 last week, and I find myself saying things like, the thing about the young comedians is they haven't learned the craft now. I sort of feel like people want to kind of get a shortcut via having a Vine or something that goes viral on the internet.
Vine closed about 5 years ago.
They have like a million internet followers, and some writers make a sort of show for them that they take around stadiums, and then they, so it's kind of, I do find myself feeling that, I guess you feel whatever time you grew up in, you feel that is normal, And politically, of course, we all grew up in a time where, after World War II, there was a strange period where it was felt that there should be some degree of social opportunity and fairness before it was gradually reverted back to normal. So, but whatever. And so obviously, I think the correct way to do stand-up I think, to become a stand-up comedian is to do loads and loads of tryout spots for years and then circuit gigs every night for 5 nights a week, and then maybe do a fringe show and blah, blah, blah. But, now people think can they get spotted for doing something that's 5 seconds long on the internet, and then can some people come in and assemble a show for them? So it does change. We're in our own way. We're applying those same sorts of criticisms that were applied to us. But I do remember a brilliant thing in 1989, a TV chat show about alternative comedy where Jim Bowen was on and David Baddiel. And Jim Bowen said, "Are you an alternative comedian?" He said, "I suppose so." And Jim Bowen said, "Yeah, it's the alternative to comedy," which I love that being said. And I like the fact that a lot of younger comics now, like Alternative Comedy Memorial Society, are using what was a pejorative term, really, as a badge of honour.
But there is, I would say, because I think there are still enough far damaged sellers that people are doing gigs in as well. It's not and I also think that it's that divide. That I think the cultural divide now is less age specific, because we probably know quite a few comics who used to feel that they were kind of proper, edgy and now do routines which are very similar to your average Daily Mail columnist, etc. And the snowflake generation and blah of some of the stuff that you deal with in your show. And then also there's lots of people who are also kicking against that as well. I just think it's harder to see. That was like this explosion. Now that's not kind of how the media work, does it? There's so many channels, so it's just.
You're looking in the 1980s when there were 4 television channels, and if suddenly people who are in this incredible, exciting live fringe become the stars of one of the 4 TV channels, that's so big and so clear. Where it's like
instantly,
it's just all over.
So many people of my age, when they talk about things that inspire them to do comedy, I mean, when you talk to all the League of Gentlemen blokes, they realise that they all watched on the same night the same showing on BBC One of Carry On Screaming at a particular evening. Their consciousness was formed by a particular broadcast at a particular time on a particular night, whereas now we obviously consume stuff completely differently.
But in a way, that's very, very exciting, because those young people still meet at university, but their influences are so much more diffuse. So what's going into the pot is so much more eclectic and varied, and who knows what people will come up with, and what a joy,
Well, and who knows what's going to come out of the other side of this in terms of how people write about it and respond to it. And I
presume that the ruling classes will just decide to give up some of their money and change their ways. And with an opposition led by a knight of the realm, the establishment will be shaking.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's
we should see, all right.
To say that it's interesting to see. How can if you've been outside clapping the nurses, how can you then go and government in which a significant position of the front bench, a significant portion of the front bench have written books saying they want the NHS dismantled? And but the problem is, how do you get that truth out there that is the case? Because they're very good at sidestepping those uncomfortable facts in those press conferences at the moment. And I don't know, who knows what will be there. It's going to be an interesting time. Certainly, I mean, you wonder I wonder what the point is of a lot of things. I mean, half the new show that I was touring that has been abandoned was about this culture war that we're talking about the demonisation of snowflakes, and of liberals. And obviously, it's going to need a massive rewrite. But where does this sort of discussion sit when people's lives have been at stake, and I mean, one would hope that it would quickly become irrelevant, really, and that more important things would be foregrounded. But of course, it may just be that all the same concerns are piggybacked onto it in whatever comes out of the other side of this crisis. I'll be fine though, because I've got this Anderson shelter. I can stay in here. I've literally got a bomb shelter in here.
Oh, this is again my wretched loft and your Anderson shelter filled with H.P. Lovecraft books, desperately trying to find your way towards Cthulhu.
Robin,
are we supposed to do show and tell? Are we supposed to brought in?
Yeah, if you've got one, but you were showing your books.
I forgot to bring anything down here, right? But I'll tell you what I'm sitting next to. I'm sitting next to a scale model of a Top of the Pop studio that was built for Stewart Lee's comedy vehicle by Lawrence Archer, who played guitar in UFO and now does a lot of prop design. And it was to have tiny mice in it. It was for mice performing a Slade song. So I'm just going to flip. This is the only thing of interest. I'll just flip this over there. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's great.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's my show and tell. That's all I've got.
Can I just, when you were talking about, I saw your show at Watford Coliseum, and it was brilliant, and it really was. There are some of the routines in it, in particular, are properly agonising in terms of just the pain of when you do about 10 minutes of doing what Ricky Gervais actually saying the unsayable would be like. My wife and I would just like, can you stop now? Because I didn't go to the loo in the interval. I just this is, and it was, but. What I loved was at one point you mentioned the fact that quite often now a father will bring his teenage son and say, "You must come with this. This man is culturally significant," and then the child sits there going, "It's not my thing, Dad." And what I think makes me enjoy your work was where we were sat, and there was huge gales of laughter throughout, but we were perfectly sat next to the 5 people who had read something about you in some newspaper and felt that they would enjoy your cultural significance and did not get it at all. And so as we were laughing uproariously, every time you thought, it's a bit like watching old Steve Merchant routines, every time you thought you couldn't laugh anymore, you would see someone just sat there going, "I don't know what this is. I don't know." And therefore it became 5 times as funny. And you were saying that night, there's still a joy after all those years of touring where you can hear people leaving and going, "Bob, we're not coming to this again. I've told you, this is just," and that you must enjoy that. You must enjoy.
Well, I feel bad about wasting people's time and money, which is why I put the quotes on the posters, saying this is the worst thing I've ever seen, or whatever, and attribute them to the people who have said them. I don't get any pleasure out of that, but I like the fact that there's still in a live show a battle to be won, and there's still a struggle. And I know a lot of people are producing content online at the moment, and a lot of people are producing content online for very worthy causes as well. But I do really like the awkwardness of the struggle of a live event, and I like the fact that things could happen in a room that you weren't expecting, and I like to try to create those events and those tensions and those situations. I sometimes get reviews that say, "Oh, he completely lost control of the room for 10 minutes at one point, but then he miraculously managed to wing it back round." And I think, well, I was doing that. To some extent, I was in control of that. So I do like that, but I don't want to waste people's time, and I don't do things to deliberately be rubbish.
No, but that's I think it's interesting though that you're someone playing a 2000 or whatever it was in Watford, and you've been doing it long enough now that at that scale that you think people would. It's a bit like I went to see a triple bill of Beckett plays, Footfalls, Rockabye, and Not I. And I saw it in Toronto, and there were people sat there just looking at their watches going, "Oh, this is so boring." And you go, look, Beckett's not like, it shouldn't come as a surprise that some of Beckett's things are slow moving.
I saw John Hurt doing Crap/Tape in the West End, and a number of people got up during it to complain to the ushers. He assumed that there was some kind of problem with the tape recorder on stage, that it kept spooling around, or that had the show started and was this it? And again, you don't take any pleasure in thinking they've had their time wasted, because it's expensive to go to a West End show as well. But I do think people sometimes have to give the people on stage the benefit of the doubt. I do love situations like that. I went to see Pat Thomas once. He's a sort of experimental keyboard player from Oxford. He does a lot of free jazz stuff. And he was on a venue in King's Cross that, to be fair, just looked like a sort of nightclub or a pub. And he was on a very low stage, and the audience were all standing sort of facing him. And a man came in who was obviously just like out on a Friday night trying to chat girls up, and started sort of wandering around. And he couldn't really work out why no one was talking to each other. And then he went onto the stage and sort of he ended up standing behind Pat Thomas, looking at the audience. And then he realised that he wasn't in a pub; he was actually in a sort of venue, and that everyone was looking towards him and the man on stage, who was actually playing what was music. It wasn't some sort of mistake. And then he had to kind of shuffle off, like someone in the background of a Morecambe Wife sketch. It was really great that the performer accidentally got onto the stage without knowing that he was even watching an event.
I think those moments where, and I'm sure we've all had them, where it's just slightly the wrong venue. Like I did the Samuel Beckett Festival in Enniskillen. I did that, and I thought, that'll be fun, and I'll do all my clever jokes about that. And then it turned out that the venue I was in was the British Legion, and they'd had to agree that, as well as allowing the audience who'd paid to come in, all the members of the British Legion waiting for the Johnny Cash tribute band would also be in. So you have that delight of playing two entirely different rooms, which is one room is people going, I hope he's got a wry take on a piece of monologue by Samuel Beckett, and someone else to go. So trying to get that, and I enjoy that challenge, and I think that's what, on a much smaller scale too, but that challenge of going, how can I somehow keep those people in the room, and also keep, and that was I don't think everyone was united by the end, but it was still a fun experiment.
The pilot proposal for Comedy Vehicle, which they didn't go with actually, was I wanted to do the same set twice. Once in a studio towards a sympathetic audience, and then the same set somewhere like on a cross-channel ferry or in the cafe at a service station or whatever, to people that didn't know what it was and probably didn't want to see it, and then to cut between the two. To prove that the material doesn't exist in isolation from the response, because as comics, you do get fed up with people. I remember I was on holiday somewhere, and the people in the little cottage opposite were complaining they'd seen a comedian that we all know, and he was rubbish, and he died, and how could he make a living? And I went, well, he obviously doesn't die every night, does he? I found myself really sticking up for him and saying, it's not mad. He doesn't go out every night to nothing. You saw him on a night when it didn't work. Well, I can't imagine why that would have been, because it was awful. I was going, yeah, but obviously different night, So I wanted to sort of build that in. As it happened, by the fourth series, the audience was so odd that it sort of sabotaged itself anyway a bit, which is kind of what I suppose what I sort of was aiming for. But it was that was kind of the idea initially, was to do it in places that it wouldn't. And that's really good in Oliver Doble's book, actually, about them trying to find, in 1979, the early days of alternative comedy, trying to find who its audience was and where they were, and ending up performing in all sorts of strange places because there wasn't an established circuit.
I remember as well, about 15 years ago, there was a comedian called Terry who set up a club that was specifically designed to do gigs in laundrettes and in unusual spaces to make it more of a kind of interesting thing, and to deliberately take it away from, chicken in a basket shouting venues, and make it sort of more of a happening, I think, more of an experience.
First of all, San Francisco in '95, I went to meet Harmon Leon, who's an American stand-up, who people of my generation will remember from the phrase "just juice." Are there any walnuts in there? No, it's just juice. But he's more famous as a sort of writer now. But he made me meet him at a club called The Brainwash, which was a laundrette downstairs and a comedy club upstairs, and you put your washing in, and then you went up to the comedy club while your washing did. And I remember thinking, God, San Francisco is amazing, because it was all these hollowed out warehouses in a former industrial area full of hipster bars and trendy burrito places. And of course, it's exactly what Shoreditch is right now, basically. But the Brainwash, that seemed like the future to me. The future of comedy was a combination of washing your clothes and having a good night out.
Right, we're gonna have some music from Steve Thompson, who's brilliant now, and then we're gonna join Sam West as well. So stay in your Anderson shelter, please, Stewart. We will come back to you.
Do not leave the shelter until you receive government information.
So we also mentioned at the top of the show, the tip jar on this. This is we're collecting money for some of the artists, performers, and venues, so that they are still able to when this is all over, whenever that may be, then all those places where you can go and see them, and also those social hubs are still there. So if you can donate, that's fantastic. Steve Thompson, some of you might know if you've ever come to some of the 9 Lesson shows or some of the shows that I've done in Hammersmith with Brian Cox. Steve, he's a brilliant jazz musician. He also plays the laser harp. The most joyous time to watch him playing the laser harp is Hammersmith, because he has to really crank it up, which means that as he's playing it, he's slightly singeing his fingers as well, which really adds a kind of edge to the harp-based jazz. So Steve Thompson has a great outfit as well. I think his current group are called 1201 Alarm, and I think what we're going to see now is a cover of Here Comes the Sun. So here is Steve Thompson with his band 1201 Alarm.
Yeah, I'll try to play some right notes, but I'm not promising. So we're not listening. Don't listen.
Shall we?
Cool.
Poppity pom pom.
Real. Everyone happy?
What's going to be next?
Oh.
What's dude?
I think we're back, and I want to say thank you so much. And you can buy their album, which is called Hello World. You can find it online. I'm not sure where, but I'm pretty certain you can find it. What a great plug. I should also just mention that we do have the tip jar, and the reason we have the tip jar is so that we can raise money collectively and spread it out where it's needed amongst performers and amongst venues as well. I also would like to say at 12 o'clock today, for between 1 and 2 hours, depending on how long it becomes, due to the fact that there will be no laughs, I'm going to be performing in my flat to no one my stand-up comedy show Tender, which is about trying to reckon with the intensity of new motherhood when you're anxious about climate change, which I don't even know how it will feel to perform it in these circumstances. And I think as I go along, I'm going to have to chop and change things. But I'm going to be streaming that on Twitch. My name on it is Josie_long. If you look for that, you can find the stream. It will start at 12. And I'm going to be doing that a few times this week. And if you enjoy it and you want to, you can go to arts-emergency.org/donate and also you can buy me a coffee on coffee.com. But yeah, and it should also be on this channel, I should say. But if it doesn't happen today on this channel, it will later in the week. I'm doing them Wednesday 12 till 2, Wednesday 8 p.m. and Sunday 9 p.m. And that is all of my plugging. And I'm so sorry that was long.
No. What you were just reminding me of that lovely Maria Bamford comedy special she did, where it just builds the audience. So starts off with her just playing to her partner, her husband and dog, and then it's her in a front room with her family and a bowling alley. It's brilliant. If any of you haven't seen Maria Bamford's work, you really should. It's absolutely fantastic.
She is one of the most wonderful comedians operating on this earth. And
mine's still on now.
Yeah.
I went around Australia with Maria Bamford for about 2 weeks, long time ago. And she was very suspicious of what the food would be like in Australia. And she had 2 suitcases and one was full of muesli.
Oh, that's such a beautiful image, a leaky suitcase of leaving a whole trail across. Because was that when you were doing those kind of gigs in the outback and stuff like that? Yeah, she was brilliant, really good. Because I didn't know who she was then. And, it was really amazing to think that you were allowed to be on the same bill as her.
Yeah.
We're joined also by Sam West. Hello, Sam.
Hello. Good morning.
Sam.
Hello. Good morning. Hello,
first of all, I've got to say, it's always interesting seeing different people's kind of, Anderson Shelter, sofa, piles of books. You have this incredible. It's an archive. It's an entire history of. It's the kind of thing that sometimes in a horror movie, I suppose, obsessive about board games who insist that people play them, but some of them will open different portals. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd be dead first, wouldn't I? Clearly. The geek snuffs it early. Yeah, I have to say played all of them. If I made a pile of all the board games I haven't played yet, it would be as tall as me. But there are about 100 in there that we have played.
Wow. And when did this obsession begin then? So is this something that goes back to your childhood?
Yes, being a sad and lonely child, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, when I was about 5, you just associate sort of. I mean, I have no problem geeking for board games now. I think they're social and brilliant, and I've never really got into computer games because I like sitting opposite people. Yeah. But about just before I started getting into Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, since my reputation is already completely shot, I may as well stamp on it.
That reminds me. I remember with Stewart years ago, about 1993, Stewart. Well, might be 94. In fact, I think it was the day we found out that Bill Hicks had died. We played Plymouth, and then we were going up to Birmingham, and we stayed at your mum's house. But you popped to a Games Workshop to have a little browse. And you were just out of it, we were bored. It was one of those things you just wander around and you were browsing in there. And a man came up to you and went, "Hello, sir, can I help you?" And you just went, "Oh, well, it's just a few years. I'm not just having a look. It was a few years ago that I was kind of into this. It's probably about 10 years ago." And he looked at you and he went, "I think you'll find the world of fighting fantasy role-playing games has changed somewhat in the last decade, sir."
I just remember that exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking how funny to be patronised. I remember that happening. You're right. Yeah,
it was great.
Well, my dad was a rep in the 70s, a head sales rep for a packaging company called JB Dyson, who were in one of these sort of vertical factories, mills in Birmingham, with frightening machines on every floor. And they used to make all the board games for Dennis Fisher, who made all the sort of tie-in games like the Doctor Who game and the Dad's Army game and stuff like that. So I used to have a disproportionately large amount of games, and I feel really bad that I've lost most of them over the years. But I've just nipped off and got this, which is the Haunted House that would have been made in my dad's factory.
Oh no!
All the pieces intact, where you build a sort of 3-dimensional.
I remember the adverts for that.
Around it, and a ball goes down the chimney and stuff like that. So he also packaged games for Dave Sullivan's pornography company that do White House and Playbirds and Sunday Sport and that kind of thing.
Hang on, were there sexy games?
Yeah, there was
Snakes
a game.
and Ladders. It's
Ludo.
pretty obvious, isn't it?
Spelled Lewdo. Ludo. And you had to go round and have sex and stuff. And but the middle was a photograph of some people having sex And,
Sorry, there were smutty board games in the 1970s.
Yeah, but they all got stolen, didn't they, by the workers? Not the games, just the artwork got stolen all the time.
And the workers they took them back.
It wasn't I know, Josie, you'd love to think it was feminist workers stealing as a protest, but it was the opposite of that. It was men stealing them to take home and use them for their intended purpose. But it was Ludo. I mean, I don't know if you can even get it anywhere anymore.
I've just looked it up on Board Game Geek. It doesn't have a page unless I've misspelt it. So
I imagined it. I'm not insane. I wouldn't. I
just think it was a card game, not a board game, wasn't it? So it might not be on board games.
He made the board, and the artwork for the board kept being stolen from the factory.
Okay, can I just say, as somebody who never lived in the 70s, this is exactly what I think the 70s is like. It's this combination of like real weird, innocent things like a board game, and then like smut. Like, it's so bizarre to me. And also the idea of like couples having an aspic moose, and then drinking a sherry, and then leaning over and playing a smutty board game.
Well, there'll be a lot of people out there watching this in lockdown wishing they'd got a copy of that game now.
And you've got them all hoarded in your Anderson shelter.
Plenty of them.
Oh, God, I'm imagining now that in an Anderson shelter with just one of those big displays of Big D nuts. For those who don't know, pubs used to have peanuts on a cardboard dispenser, and there would be a pretty lady behind them. And the idea was each time you bought a packet of nuts, a little bit more of her would be revealed. So I imagine now a man alone in a kind of lewd version of Crap's Last Tape, just thinking, which peanuts do I take today in this pandemic? Ugh. You've really lowered the tone, Stewart.
Is it really not there, Sam? Ludo?
I know. I'm LEWDO.
Yeah. Maybe there's a little gap between the D.
I think there's a hyphen. Yeah, I think the.
Oh my God, this has really got me, and I really appreciate it.
BoardGameGeek.com. This is great. Lewd. If I just put in LEWD, it might finish.
Maybe it's called
Lewd Scene. That's too on the nose, that is.
No, I would leave. You know what? You don't want that in your search engine, to be honest. So I just. But it was real. It might disappear off the face of the earth. You know,
well, somebody's got to fill that gap.
Well, there is a weird bit of the internet kind of certain bit of cultural history where everything is incredibly well sourced. And then there is this little kind of patch of kind of, 70s, 80s stuff, which has kind of almost got slightly, no one's bothered to make a page yet. Yeah. Have you got anything behind it? Are they all proper board game, or do you have some of those? Mentioning the Doctor Who and Dad's Army.
The Colditz game I saw.
Yeah, Escape from Colditz is one that doesn't hit the table very often anymore.
Yeah,
But actually, that Hare and Tortoise is a real classic. Do you know that game?
No.
That's for mathematicians. That's fun. It has a sort of factorial way of paying for moves. You don't roll a dice. You use carrots. And if you want to do three spaces in 3 goes, you play 1 carrot each. But if you do it in 1 go, you pay 3 + 2 + 1, which is 6. So the more hare-like you are, the more expensive it is, and the more tortoise-like you are, the slower you go, but the cheaper it is. And 5-year-olds can understand it, but it's always a really good race game. It deserves more love.
Can I ask you? Can you recommend any of your favourite games that people might not necessarily be aware of yet, that people could source?
Yeah. Well, the breakthrough game for Euros is Carcassonne.
Yeah, we played that yesterday. We played it yesterday in our house.
It's really fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Ticket to Ride.
Yes.
The Settlers of Catan. I'd recommend Azul if you like abstract games.
I think Settlers of Catan is really good. Carcassonne right there. You had there Carcassonne. That's really famous for the sort of architecture of it. Classic Middle Ages, French castle. It was actually a construct. In the 19th century, it was sort of rebuilt in an imaginary style that then became thought of as what it was really like. And in fact, the same architect did a building called Woodchester Mansions in Gloucestershire that is abandoned now, but you can go around it in its sort of state of disrepair. It's really funny. Like Carcassonne the citadel became a sort of definitive image of medieval France.
But then so much medievalism is that, isn't it? It's people in the 19th century.
And the people, they were doing live jousting in front of it. They were really buying into the myth there. And I have to tell you, French jousting it doesn't tick the health and safety boxes that English do.
No, they don't mind it. They don't mind, do they, in Europe?
They really don't mind.
They're folk events, like, you know, here. But I mean, in Gloucestershire, the cheese rollers had to go underground. Basically, it's because it's the council won't defend it because obviously it's dangerous to essentially fall down a hill towards some cheese. But, so they just do it anyway. But no one's.
I went to visit my friend who works for the EU in Brussels, and we stepped into the road, and I nearly got run down. And I said, "Is this a road?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, it's not marked." And they said, "Yeah, they don't really go for health and safety in Brussels."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's not the way we've been taught. Brussels is that." And he said, "No, it's just like Northern Italy, really. I mean, everybody has the same rules, but Britain's the only one that obeys them."
Yeah, well, in fact, they
sold a complete pup on this one.
Yeah, they're sort of folk events in Europe, like the running of the bulls and stuff, feel incredibly dangerous. I went to Berlin on New Year's Eve once, and what happens basically? People just throw fireworks at each other and you have to jump out of the way. And it's sort of understood that if you chose... Well, I think there was probably quite a devil-may-care atmosphere there during the days when the wall was still up and, you know, when they could really kick off, they did. But yeah, it does. Simon Munnery explained that he'd been to an event in Spain somewhere where two local teams built huge dragons that they then went inside and chased towards each other across the square, shooting just fireworks and explosives at each other, and you had to get out of the way. It sounds entirely plausible, but it does make the things here look a bit, you know, they're not on that level. But God, that's the point of cheese roll. We always go to that. We're not going to be able to go. I wonder if people will feel that someone secretly has to go to Cooper's Hill in Gloucester and roll the cheese down it anyway, even though there isn't an audience there to observe.
Could that be their daily exercise? Could that be their daily exercise?
Yeah, it might be.
Just happen to be at the top of a hill with the cheese.
To no one.
They could be saying they were delivering the cheese to someone who couldn't get it.
Yeah. Rolling it down as a food.
Disguised as an Ocado lorry. A delivery there.
So
but if the cheese
we need
rolls
to say
and
that
no one's there to watch it, that's the great philosophical question in cheese rolling. Sam, I wanted to ask as well. There was one other. We weren't going to talk about board games, but Stewart, of course, with his meat notes with that. I didn't know about all these H.P. Lovecraft board games that you've got one behind you there. That
Mansions of Madness. Yes, which is just had a second edition and is very popular. Yeah, these grew out of the Call of Cthulhu role playing game. Thing, which was a sort of spin-off to Dungeons and Dragons in the 70s. Lots of 1970s people pouring away in libraries looking for great old things, and there was one amazing mechanic that they had where there was a percentile thing where you could know about that you had a percentage score for knowing about the Cthulhu mythos, and you had a percentage score for sanity, and they always added up to 100. So the more you discovered about Cthulhu, the more insane you became, which I thought was brilliant. It's very simple. I love that mechanic.
It just reminded me that about 25 years ago, Graham Linehan invited me round to play Call of Cthulhu, but I've not gone round yet to do that. I don't know if the invitation will still stand.
Paper.
Long time ago.
I know you've got a show and
he's
tell.
Probably been playing it a lot and done really, really well in it. It sounds like.
Oh, look.
Oh my God!
Oh, that's not
what
I
remember. That's not it. Someone's just put up a screen grab of Ludo. The Ludo I'm talking about had a naked photograph of naked people having sexual.
Hang on, there were two lewd versions of Ludo.
No, but that was the board, wasn't it? That wasn't the cover. That
Cluedo, and someone's just messed with it. The Ludo.
Sam. Anyway, let's find out your show.
Stewart has, I don't think, has ever seen this, or not for a while anyway. This is Edinburgh 1987. A photograph from a production of Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
And that's Stewart.
Yeah. I was a waiter. I was in one scene. You were very good in that.
2 years after you won that award for acting. And I said,
Do you know what? It's really weird. It was my wife's birthday in Edinburgh last year. And she went, let's go to this bar. And we went there, and it was that venue where that play happened, which is now a bar.
Oh.
And the weirdest thing is, do you remember that the stage was actually down two sort of steps in the middle of it was a sunken sort of
sunken, yeah.
It might have been a cockfighting pit or something at some point or whatever, but that structure was still there in the bar. But now it was just a weird place where you kind of stepped down and went across it and then went up again. And it's so incredible to have been going to the Fringe for nearly 35 years now, and to see the change of usage of these places, to be bombarded with all those memories. That was, I remember that production really well. And I was talking to everyone about it. Of course, no one was interested. I'm glad that you've come on because you were in it. You're the only person that can remember it.
Still the only time we've worked together. Oh no, that's not true. We did a Billy Bragg.
We've been in a Billy Bragg video together as well. Yeah.
Oh, what's that? DIY Blue? What's it called? Handyman Blues.
Handyman Blues.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that the other day actually, because there's a Seamus Heaney poem called Digging, where he remembers looking out of the window and seeing his father digging like his grandfather dug, and he said, "Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it." And I thought that's basically the poem version of Handyman Blues, isn't it? When Billy said, "I can't do DIY, but I'll write poetry instead."
Yeah.
You've got, because I know you're doing some poetry readings as well during this time, aren't you?
Mm.
I would, by the way, quickly mention, if you're looking for things as well as what Sam's poetry, anytime Sam Neill puts anything up on the internet at the moment, it's an absolute delight. So yes. Sam Neill has just the most. Have you? I don't know if I'm not sure if you've worked with him, Sam. Have you done any?
No, never met him. I'm a big fan.
Oh man, he's so good. He's so good. We've got some other. There's something else. Ludo. Does that look like the right Ludo too?
How were there so many different versions?
Wow,
it's interesting. This is the modern world, isn't it? You've gone from denying it exists to saying none exists, but there's loads of different ones, right? And that's the thing. It would have taken years to work that out, and now it's seconds.
It's almost proof of the scientific idea worlds theory. It's proved by Ludo. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Also, can I apologise for my daughter's sort of sound appearance again?
No, you can't. It was lovely.
She gets very frustrated. Sorry.
Yeah, if anyone's watching and they wonder when you can still hear Josie's daughter, but we take off obviously she doesn't want to. So that's why sometimes there's a wonderful gurgling and inquisitive nature in the background. So what? Yes, poem. So you chose one for today. Yes,
I've been since March the 18th. I've been doing this thing called Pandemic Poems, where I thought, okay, none of the things that I do face to face as an actor are very possible or useful at the moment, but I can read verse. So I stuck out a tweet saying, if there's a poem, if hearing a poem would make you happy or sad or thoughtful or just give you a space to yourself, then I'll do it. And I got about 450 suggestions. And I've roped in a few friends, and I do about 3 a day. We're up to 82 today in 25 days, so we're doing quite well. And the real pleasure is that because I don't get to choose, I get to choose which poems to do, but I don't get to choose overall which poems to do because they're all requests, is that I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And this poem by Pablo Neruda, which I didn't know, was requested by somebody, and I just thought you ought to hear it, because if ever a poem has found its time, it's this one. Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. Translated by Alistair Reid. An amazing space, but he creates there, and I just thought how wonderful to be asked to do that. So I do 3 or 4 a morning. Get up about 6, go into a hut at the foot of the garden. Very lucky to have a garden. I would have talked to you from there, but I've hung up a duvet, and it looks rather like a padded cell at the moment. I decided to make it board games instead. And it's really giving me some sense of purpose. It's really useful.
Is it SoundCloud that you
if you want to listen to them, there are some very great guest readers as well. The SoundCloud playlist is at the top of my Twitter feed in my my biog, Exit the Lemming, 2 T's.
So you mentioned there about the difficulty of having purpose, which of course is for everyone, not merely us and the strange things that we do. But that is we talked before we started this today in terms of also that strange feeling you're meant to be going into rehearsal within like the next week.
Yeah.
And you still don't really know. And we were saying what we've ended up in now is we truly are. Every human being is in development hell. It's not merely that it's not just the screenwriters. It's not just the musicians who can't. Everyone is in this kind of development hell.
You can at least get on with writing a screenplay. You can't rehearse a play.
But
we were meant to go into rehearsal for the revival of my partner's play, The Watsons, which was going to the West End. And we haven't officially been cancelled or put off yet, and we were starting next Monday. So it is quite odd. Sorry, go on, Josie.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it makes me wish that I wrote historical fiction largely about boats, because then you could just sit and research all the boats and you wouldn't have to be thinking. I think as somebody who was trying to write like dystopian fiction about a strange near future, I'm like, I have nothing.
But at least if you did write dystopian fiction, you could go out into a London that was a bit like the Day of the Triffids. I mean, it's very 28 Days Later out at the moment.
There's an odd thing, though, isn't there, generally with how all fiction is working. I binge watched the 3rd series of Ozark on one of these platforms, and I thought that's interesting because this is taking place in a parallel world where the pandemic hasn't happened, and. That's about a business, the drug business, organised crime, which would have been totally transformed by this and wiped out, and the casino wouldn't be open and whatever. So you sort of think, what's going to happen again afterwards? We'll all imaginary worlds and fictions and dramas and soap operas and songs and everything. Well, they all have to address the fact that they're in this post-pandemic world. Or will people continue writing things as if it's like when continuity goes wrong in Marvel or DC Comics and they just sort of scrap a whole couple of 2-year run of a comic because something got messed up and went, it was Spider-Man had a dream. It was that, It's kind of a really interesting logical problem, but also about how, and then you extrapolate out from that is, how will people, how will people feel that it changes the whole way they think about everything? And how will their memories of the past be changed by the transformative effect of this? I mean, basically, everyone's going to have had a sort of a personality breakdown, and what will our characters emerge as? And I suppose what use will all the sorts of things that we do be in helping to rebuild that? They're not of any practical use. But will people be helped to focus their thoughts and think about what's happened to them, what their form, what the point of their lives is, by some jokes about farts?
I think they're going to need the laughs, Stuart. I think we can say that. I think we can say that's fairly certain.
Really love the idea that when the soaps come back, Hollyoaks and EastEnders and everything, there'll just be one character who's like, I had the strangest dream. Anyway, back to the other storylines.
So does Hollyoaks not exist? Because I think that's a fascinating thing, Coronation Street or Hollyoaks or whatever, in which it is the everyone's just kind of isolated. So you're down Coronation Street, but you don't go out of your terraced house. You stay there.
I found myself thinking about this the other day, and this is probably something we should have talked about, which is that episode of The Goodies where they become encased in concrete. Remember that episode? The whole house they live in becomes encased in concrete, and they live inside for an enormously long time, getting old while the world changes outside. And I was thinking about that yesterday before I found out that Tim Brooke Taylor had died from you, Robin, the bird of death, who renounced the loss of people. But
I was thinking about the clown virus episode. Do you remember when Bill Oddie's trousers full of tomato soup and he ran down the road? When I was 8, that was absolutely the funniest thing I had ever seen. And of course, it's now, even if they do repeat The Goodies, which they never do, that's the one episode they can't show.
Yes,
it's interesting
to have experienced The Goodies in real time, and I think it's because they were trying ahead of their ability to do special effects and visual jokes with technology that wasn't really up to it. So I think to anyone under 40, it looks a bit bizarre sometimes. But it was so exciting to see it, coming out week by week, to think, well, what are they going to do by speeding up the footage this week? Or thinking weird edit, or just things you've never seen before.
And that thing you said about certain comedians being in on the same night and watching the same show.
Yeah,
there's been several tributes to TBT saying that people met in the queue for them to sign the Goodies out annual.
Yeah,
and when they were 8, it was absolutely their thing.
Yeah,
lovely. As far as I only worked with him on a few things. In January, I did a couple of events with him, and everything you would imagine. You know what? I loved Graham when Graham Garden said about him. He said he was a class act, and that phrase, a class act. You know what? That has something so beautiful about it. And again, his generosity with everyone. I love that story that someone said that he couldn't watch Strictly Come Dancing because he would feel so wretched for whoever had been voted. It was too much of an emotional trauma for him. And I think, isn't that just yeah,
that's a lovely story. Yes, I quite understand that.
No, he was very. I found it. I did an event. I said it in January. I did one with Tim about the 1948 show. And again, I've mentioned this quite a few times, and I'm going to keep plugging it. There's this wonderful autobiography of Marty Feldman called I'm Marty, and it was basically it was in the attic, and no one knew. And then when his wife died 30 years after Marty Feldman died, a guy's going through the attic through his stuff, and he goes, "Oh wow, he wrote his autobiography. It's really, really lovely." And when I met Tim to do this event about last 1948 show, I said to him and Christine, his wife, I said, "Oh, have you read this book?" They didn't even know about it. But again, the way both of their eyes, all their eyes lit up, and they went, "Oh, Marty was such a lovely man." The first reaction to, when you're always worried when you bring someone out in case someone goes, "Oh, well, I'll tell you a few stories about them." And it was quite the opposite, and everything. And there was another lovely moment where Natalie Haynes was meant to be doing the festival and then couldn't. And I mentioned that to Tim and Christine, and Tim, he went, "Oh, we love that show." Everything was you know what I mean? It was just, it was really beautiful about the positive things. And it's the best show on radio. Natalie Haynes talking about the classics, and I thought that's a lovely thing to see. When very often the cliches of show business are that everyone gets in the green room and goes, "I'll tell you about," and it was quite the opposite. So anyway, I just thought I would. But I just found Kevin Eldon's. I got questions from various people. Stewart, of course, was something about free jazz for Bill Oddie. That's what he wanted to ask. Bill was a huge fan of yours, Stu. He really is. He kept going on about how much.
Well, I'm a huge fan of his. It's been great. I've got to know him over the years, and I love all the music in the Goodies as well. It's kind of a weird mixture of progressive and sort of hillbilly banjo music. And
they had a great song about Cricklewood, didn't they?
Pardon?
They had a great song about Cricklewood.
Yeah. He used to write for it, and the band, the people he has playing with him, are ludicrously overqualified. They're sort of stars of the British jazz scene of the 60s and 70s, just knocking out these mad tunes. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're right. It was very interesting when Graham and Tim would talk about the fact that one of the albums, I can't remember which one, about 1975, you'll remember, up Josie, it has the kind of policeman's opera thing in it and stuff. And Graham and Tim just went, "Yeah, we just had to turn up for an afternoon for that Goodies album." It was Bill's thing. Bill was living this wonderful. But Kevin Eldon's question, which was for this event back in January, was, when you were riding the 3-seater bicycle, how much of a safety risk was posed by the ever-present danger of your enormous flares getting caught up in the chain? So I thought it was a very Kevin. But then what I loved was he said, "Please could you preface this question with, 'Hello, Goodies. I was always a big fan of the show. Thanks very much for so many great laughs and happy memories.'" And then afterwards he just said, "I hope that's not too cheesy. It's just the 13-year-old me would be thrilled to be able to ask them a question." And I think that's what sometimes people go back to shows like that and they get cross because it doesn't make them feel how it did when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. And you go, well, no, but they're separate issues. What that did to you then, you will not be able to make happen again. But don't dismiss that delight.
You can't step back into the river, can you? You can't step into the same river again. You just have to enjoy the fact that you were there at that time and treat it for where it was. Oh.
Can I plug a show that I'm not in, but I've just been watching that not enough people know about? Do any of you watch The Leftovers?
No, I don't know what it is.
Well, it's I just worked with Callum Woodhouse on this new series of All Creatures Great and Small, and Callum watches absolutely everything. But luckily, he's also got really good taste. He's only about 27, and he told me this is a series from about 5 years ago, 3 series, 2015, 16, and 17, American, and it's about a world in which 2% of the population spontaneously disappear, and utterly unexplained. And I sort of wish I hadn't chosen to the point where 2% of the population were under threat of death and might have disappeared permanently. But what it does so beautifully is it sort of takes the dial of society and gives it one click to the right without special effects or anything being different, and suddenly everything's different. And how people deal with the guilt of being left behind, and and the sort of weird superstitions and cults that grow up. It's been a real comfort to watch during the lockdown, because you don't watch it thinking, well, they're too close to each other. Obviously, that wouldn't really happen, because everything's sort of fucked up. Max Richter did the music. That's probably what it's best known for. And it's got some really good people in it. But for some reason, people don't know about it. So I really recommend it.
And where was that again?
Well, I got the box. I got the box set. I think you can get it streaming. I think it was originally HBO, but I bought the box set because I'm a bit analog like that.
We've run out of time. We ran out of time about 10 minutes ago. But I didn't talk at all, Stu, about something which is your documentary that I've just started watching, King Rocker, which is all about the Nightingales.
Yeah, and Michael Cumming, who directed Brass Eye and Toast of London.
Huh.
We were both fans of this group, the Nightingales, and Ted Chippington, the comedian, and they thought it might be good to make a film about them. And we found out that each other were into it, and we spent about 2 years working on it, crowdfunded it. Most people worked on it for nothing. We paid the crews for about the 10 days of filming that we had, and obviously the archive clearances were expensive. But we were about to start taking it around film festivals and doing live tours and live screenings and stuff. Now we're trying to sort of see if we can place it somewhere. It's a thing that's gone into a sort of limbo. But we were lucky that we got it done before everything shut down. Really, Michael edited it in his shed in his garden. But yeah, it's a film about this group. It's about how someone kept a not hugely well-known group going for 40 years, and it's offset against the history of a weird piece of public sculpture from Birmingham, a big statue of King Kong that ended up being lost and turning up. Well, I'm not going to say where it turned up. That's the exciting thing about the film. But maybe you'll be able to see that somewhere soon. I hope so. Can I just mention that Go Faster Stripe, that are the label that do lots of CDs and downloads of all the best comedians, are they're having a different thing you can download every week, and you give a donation to the Trussell Food Banks, which I think's. There's another thing in it that Dominic Raab said there was no such thing as food poverty. People merely had, he said,
budgeting issues.
Yeah, short-term cash flow problems. Yeah, but now even more than before, they're a massive lifeline for people. So you can give a donation to Trussell Food Banks if you go and get something from Go Faster Stripe.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Brilliant. I love your opening. Well, not quite your opening line, but it might be actually in King Rocker, where you say, "We live in a culture where mediocrity is rewarded and originality is punished." And
well, here is to a more beautiful present and a more hopeful future.
Well, we'll have to end on that. You've got to go. I love it when I get that look from you going, what I'm trying to do, Robin, is I've got to go now. I've got a child. You've got a 12-year-old. He's happy playing on other things. Sam, thank you so much. 40 minutes.
Pleasure.
And can find, as Sam said, Exit the Lemming. That's and yeah. Well, I wish we could have talked more about this.
The hashtag is Pandemic Poems.
Pandemic Poems.
Also, if this lasts a long time, please come back.
Well, that's we are now booking the week that we hoped was no longer required, and that will then continue. Thanks very much, Josie. And so, what time is your show today? I can't remember. 12 till 2. If anyone fancies it, it will be a bit rough and sketchy today, but it might just be a fun thing to be in each other's company for a bit. And then Wednesday 12 till 2, Wednesday 8 till 10 p.m, and Sunday 9 till 11 p.m. I'm trying to do a spread so that I can do it A, when the baby's sleeping, and B, later, so that if people in other countries want to watch it. Look at Stewart. Oh, look at him doing his fade out routine. That is he's created a level of looks like a little mole. Oh no, someone's found Cthulhu. He's doing this visual effect. Thank you so much, Stu, as well. I hope that your tour will it was such a funny show. It was a really, and Watford Coliseum was the perfect place to see it. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to our Patreon and do anything, and have a nice day off in this strange. And also, thank you to everyone who is still working and helping people. Thank you every day.